Evolution, a deliberate yet subliminal process for all but humankind. We cannot wait.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
He's on the move.
Coming up, built in the 1800s by the Rothschilds, Waddesdon Manor is a treasure trove of classic art, sculpture and design. The Italianate village of Portmeirion on the coast of North Wales is celebrating its 75th anniversary. And a museum which charts the lives and careers of Liverpool's most famous musical export, the Beatles. There's nothing like it in Europe. This is the biggest man-made mound of its sort, and it's 4,500 years old. It's one of the continent's biggest burial sites, but exactly what's inside Silbury Hill in Wiltshire in southern England remains a mystery. Now that could all change as archaeologists, scientists and engineers set to work. Their first job, to stabilise the 130-foot Neolithic mound. Internal shafts dug by excavators and treasure seekers throughout the centuries have already begun to collapse. With the help of a helicopter, the shafts are filled with polystyrene and covered with a chalk cap. When the area is stabilised, English Heritage, who looks after the site, will undertake a seismic survey, giving them an indication of what's inside. The scientists will pass sound waves through the mound in a multiple crisscross pattern, and will then analyse these sounds, using them to create an image of the conditions inside the mound. Some say it could be the burial site of legendary King Sel and his horse. Some claim he was buried in gold armour. But using the latest techniques in 3D imaging, the mystery surrounding one of Europe's biggest burial mounds could soon be solved. Stepping into these immense and elegant grounds, the visitor could be forgiven for thinking they were in France. From the elegant architecture to the intricate detailing, everything about this home indicates the grandeur of a French chateau. But appearances can be deceiving, for Waddesdon Manor is in the heart of the English countryside. The manor was built for Baron Ferdinand de Rothschild, who wanted a house that would suit his collection of art treasures. De Rothschild also entertained lavishly, and his guests included royalty and important figures of the era who came to enjoy themselves at the weekends. Masterpieces from bygone eras adorn every corner of the manor. The lush carpets, rugs and tapestries from the 18th century are a clear reminder of the opulence of the time. One can well imagine royalty, lit by chandeliers, sitting at the very desks that remain on display. The National Trust acquired the property in 1957, and it was restored in the early 90s. These floor plantings, based on a ribbon-style traditional Victorian garden, are considered amongst the best in the world. Designer Oscar de la Renta made these flower beds to look like a rainbow. He added pineapples as a sign of friendship with the Dominican Republic. Oscar de la Renta has also donated designer gowns from his recent collections, while dresses from a bygone era are also on display. Among them, a satin and silver wedding dress worn by Lord Rothschild's great-grandmother, Rosika, in 1807. The National Trust is determined to ensure that Waddesdon Manor remains open, so that its beauty can be enjoyed by everyone and not just the lucky few. On the coast of Snowdonia in North Wales, an Italianate bell tower dominates the fairy tale village of Portmeirion. Mediterranean-coloured houses mingle with Corinthian columns. Balustrade balconies overlook tinkling fountains. And classical confections echo 5,000 years of architectural history. Portmeirion is the creation of Welsh architect Sir Clough Williams-Ellis, known as Clough. He built this 70-acre model village on his own private peninsula over a period of 50 years. His intention was to celebrate man living in harmony with the environment. The bell tower is the dramatic opening gesture of a surreal architectural performance. He wanted to show that beauty could contribute to people's lives both practically and spiritually. Portmeirion attracts 200,000 people a year. Clough had so much fun building it that he hoped people would also have fun when they actually visited. Tourists coming here are guided into the main square through a series of Baroque arches, one lavishly decorated with a superb painted ceiling. Children especially enjoy the place for what it is, a make-believe village or town. All is as Clough planned. He wanted to show that it was possible to develop a naturally beautiful site without defiling it, and that architectural good manners could also be good business. He restored and opened the hotel overlooking the sea to give him the economic base on which to realize his dream. Not everyone is impressed, but that, nevertheless, would sit well with the architect. Clough always wanted some sort of reaction, either positive or negative. He didn't want to create an environment where people would just come and not notice at all. The concept of a tightly grouped coastal village had formed in Clough's mind years before he found the perfect site. In the early 1920s, he bought the overgrown peninsula cheaply with savings from his profession. He added a cottage at a time, completing each building in the winter, out of the tourist season. He was hoping to show that architecture could be both beautiful and fun. The village also became an exercise in historic restoration. This statue of Buddha was salvaged from a film shoot, and like the observatory tower and the stone statue of Nelson, the entire village is now a conservation area. The project became a passion for Clough, who was 94 years old when it was completed. Portmeirion's town hall was designed to house a ballroom salvaged from a Welsh stately home. Clough bought the Jacobean ceiling for £13. It was part of a vision that took a lifetime to achieve. There was one last building to be restored, though. Clough had bought Castle Jude Wraith in 1931, hoping to turn it into a hotel. In 2001, nearly 25 years after his death, his vision is finally being realised by the Portmeirion Foundation. It aims to preserve the village for the benefit of all. Overall, the complex now employs about 200 people. The commercial side of the village is boosted by the success of Portmeirion pottery, a significant force in the industry. Clough's daughter, Susan Williams-Ellis, designs it. The simplicity and beauty of the shapes attract buyers from all over the world. Portmeirion also has a huge following from fans of the cult British 1960s television series The Prisoner. The village proved the perfect setting for the bizarre prison kingdom from which actor Patrick McGoohan repeatedly tried to escape. His surreal adventures as a secret agent in a place where everyone is known by a number has been seen as a striking allegory on state oppression and the freedom of the individual. Every year, the Prisoner Appreciation Society reenacts scenes from the series. Here they're rehearsing the famous human chess game in which number 6 tries to find out who runs the village. On a gentler note, and for those with more traditional holiday pursuits in mind, a visiting Italian orchestra provides entertainment. It reinforces Clough's belief that when space, beauty and nature come together, people find themselves at ease. The Portmeirion Foundation aims to continue Clough's work. The restoration of his baronial home is the next project. It will house an exhibition dedicated to Clough's conservation work. At 5:30 in Portmeirion, the day visitors leave and the village becomes the exclusive preserve of those staying in the hotel, or in the castle, or in the unique cottages scattered around the headland. The hotel trade may have been a means to an end for Clough, but it allowed him to pursue his dream when many people thought he was mad to do so. Now, architects from around the world come to marvel at what he achieved, an example of architecture that enhances a beautiful landscape and improves the human lot.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The traditional British pub is facing an uphill battle to survive. Instead of heading to their old local, drinkers are now heading for more modern pubs. Theme pubs, especially organic and sports bars, are now a popular choice, leaving the future of the traditional and previously much-loved pubs in question. The traditional pub is seen by many young people as middle-class, middle-aged and rather boring. The younger generation is seeking a cocktail bar atmosphere, where old wood and velvet are swapped for chrome and plastic. In some extreme cases, robots have taken over from the bartenders. The latest development is organic pubs, offering health-conscious customers a choice of organic and vegetarian beer. Cocktail and sports bars are not far behind. Where then does that leave the traditional British pub? Well, some are fighting back and trying to attract customers with traditionally brewed beer. Others are left hoping customers will come to enjoy the old-fashioned atmosphere of a bygone era. One day, perhaps, the traditional pub may even come back as a theme pub, when people have forgotten what they were really like. The newly renovated dockside in Liverpool, Britain's famous port city, houses a museum which charts the lives and careers of the city's most famous musical export, the Beatles. The story of the Fab Four runs from their earliest performances in Hamburg and the Cavern Club in Liverpool, through the days of Beatlemania to the psychedelic phase of the 60s and the eventual breakup of the group. An appendix to the Beatles' story has also been opened at the museum. Inspirations looks at the rock and roll performers of 50s America that predated and inspired the Beatles. The exhibition is a collection of posters, photographs and other memorabilia of the greats of the early rock and roll era, like Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly. Artists from whom the Beatles no doubt gathered their early inspiration. Visitors to the exhibition can hear the original recordings of classics like Elvis's That's All Right and How Come No One Loves Me by the Everly Brothers, and compare them with other versions. These artifacts are on loan from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the United States, which opened in 1995, and prides itself on being the preeminent place in the world for a collection of rock and roll artifacts and memorabilia. And Beatles fans could soon have their own place in the media. A British company is to put the sound effects from half a century of motion pictures and key highlights from world history on the internet. The Tape Gallery in London's Soho is where staff are logging and digitising some 4 million sound effects tapes. The effects include Second World War bombing raids and the screaming Beatles fans of the 60s. When completed, the new library will be the largest online resource in the world. It's expected the website will receive up to 1 million hits in its first year, growing to 5 million within the next 3 years. Most of those using the site are musicians, website designers, other studios and film companies, who all need good, high-quality sound effects. And with interest in the new library going global 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the Tape Gallery looks set for a lucrative future thanks to the wonders of sound and the internet. The Royal Festival Hall in London has celebrated its 50th birthday. Throughout its history, it's attracted the greatest national and international names, from Toscanini to Duke Ellington, from Frank Sinatra to Radiohead. The quality of the artists and the orchestras ensures its continuing popularity. It also occupies a special place in the nation's heart. Built for the Festival of Britain in 1951, it became a focus for national aspirations during the austerity days after the war. It was the first post-war building to be given listed status and is still regarded as an architectural masterpiece. People participation was one of the main aims of the hall's creators. Its ballroom, the largest in London, allows visitors to become performers. Although classical music is at the heart of the events program, Baroque dance workshops, mime, free foyer demonstrations, concerts and recitals are all part of its rich legacy. As it celebrates its past, the Royal Festival Hall also has a keen eye on the future. Work is already underway on a major refurbishment that will see the auditorium and acoustics upgraded, public spaces restored and access for all improved. As it celebrates its half-century, the Royal Festival Hall remains the jewel in the crown of London's South Bank.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
These shelves at the University of Southampton contain over 300 years of history. Until now, access to these government documents from 1688 to 1995 has been restricted. If anybody wanted to use the collection, they'd be confronted by thousands of volumes of original source material around which it was very difficult to navigate. But now, thanks to funding from the British Library, they're being scanned to go online. The project, led by researchers from the university, will allow access from the web to subjects as diverse as past foot-and-mouth epidemics to the 19th century political views of the Channel Tunnel. Access to the information is free using www.bopcris.ac.uk and will prove an invaluable tool for researchers and those interested in British government history. It covers everything from current topical issues to matters of social change. The project is now moving to the next phase. Shortly, work on a full-text archive of documents from 1801 onwards begins. And while newer technology has its place in preserving older documents, older technology has played its part in the development of space-age techniques. The flamboyant aviator Wiley Post proved the first real pressure suit when he flew his plane, the Winnie May, on a series of high-altitude flights in 1935. Years later, many suits for space evolved based on Post design. Many went no further than the prototype stage. Our first spacesuits were direct adaptations from Navy and Air Force high-altitude pressure garments. John Glenn, America's first astronaut to orbit the Earth, wore one of these during the flight of Friendship 7 in 1962. Later, astronaut Ed White made history as America's first spacewalker. For the first time, the suits had to withstand the open vacuum of space outside the capsule and protect the astronauts from extreme temperatures and micrometeorites. To land astronauts on the moon, a different set of functions was required. A full range of physical movement was necessary to carry out exploration of the lunar surface. These suits were custom made. Each seam was tailored by hand. Gloves were molded from the hands of the astronauts. Cooling was provided by this liquid-cooled undergarment. The suit consisted of a pressure barrier and multiple layers of a thermal, micrometeorite and abrasion-resistant material. The shuttle required yet another spacesuit concept. The modular design could be converted to fit any astronaut. And then there was the Zero pre-breathe suit, targeted for use on the space station. In the underwater test facility that simulates space conditions, astronauts evaluate the suit components while practicing the assembly of space station structures. This suit was designed to eliminate the extensive onboard preparation required before working in space. Not only would it be more efficient, but the savings in time would allow astronauts to respond to emergencies immediately. There were trade-offs. The pressure in the CPR suit was twice that in the shuttle suit. Increased pressure is harder to design for because the suit has to be sturdier, and joints need to be engineered so that there is minimal resistance to movement. So since that first high-altitude flight in 1935, many ideas and theories for spacesuits have been designed, tested, and either discarded or further developed. Through time, spacesuits have evolved from limited mobility systems to the present, where we're seeing more and more sophistication for use on the space station and beyond. The largest display of restored military vehicles in the world recently attracted 80,000 people to an exhibition in England. The machines ranged from World War I to the 21st century and came in all shapes and sizes. One enthusiast described the gathering as a classic car show, but with khaki and camouflage. Nearly every country in Europe, including Scandinavia and Czechoslovakia, was represented. And there were also some machines that rolled in from the United States and Australia. Some of the jeeps had come from as far as Moscow. The smallest exhibit was this well bike, a hand-carried airborne motor scooter used by British paratroopers during World War II. It's taken nearly 2 decades to restore this Churchill tank. It was found at the bottom of a scrapyard in Portsmouth in 1986, and the work is still not finished. Some of the tanks are valued at up to £500,000 each. Nearly 3,000 restored military vehicles were on display during the 5-day exhibition, consuming over 100,000 gallons of fuel. Oh well, it's certainly one way of ploughing up your land. The Belgian coastal town of Newport lay at a crucial section of the Western Front during the First World War. Opposing armies hacked at each other there for 4 years along a network of trenches that stretched from the Swiss border to the Channel. But when houses began to collapse recently, few connected it to the fighting that raged around the town in that war. Ben Ferns fought in France as a teenager. Before his recent death, he told historians about the secret underground life of wartime Newport. Whilst the town was shelled mercilessly, underneath the streets the opposing armies dug miles of protected tunnels. 80 years on, the town is finding a problem with subsidence, because many of the excavations, particularly in the silts and clays of Flanders, were supported by timber, and over time the timber has begun to rot. Geologists have now mapped the tunnels and shelters dug by military engineers and matched these with areas of subsidence in the present-day town. They believe other areas of the old Western Front could also be at risk from wartime tunnel collapse. Records show how meticulously the tunnels were planned and constructed, and more importantly, how extensive. The team hope to hold a public meeting in the town to explain their findings and the implications for the people. Only then can the daunting task of rectifying the problem begin.